doing the things that I do every day. I'm either with my kids, my daughters who drive me crazy, or I am doing things at the school. I mean, when I was the principal, I stayed at the school late hours of the night and weekends. The school building was always open, so we always had activities going on. And I have a social group as well, and it's about maybe 50 or 60 of those guys now, and we usually do different things. So I mentor a lot of them, and I'm doing that, or I'm also presently going to a lot of events for my dad who just passed away. So there's a lot of memorials and events like that I have to go to on behalf of my family. Or I'm writing. I write, still write. My dad told me don't get rid of my poetry license, so I write, and I get invited to places to read poetry or be a part of kind of cultural events like that. So I usually do those things, and I like attending these kind of social cultural events. I've been educated for 22 years, man, so most of my entire life has been devoted to other people's children and their families. So usually when you're an educator, you're not just dealing with the child, you're dealing with their brothers, sisters, cousins, the mother, the father, everybody. So you're usually engaged with the family. I mean, things that impact your life as a child, you carry it with you, either negatively or positively. You carry it with you, and it helps you transfer, learn new information based on the old information or the old experiences that you have. And usually that's some of the things that's wrong with our young people today. They don't have a lot of kind of diverse experiences in their life, so it's difficult for them to transfer or get new information from old information, and we're spending a lot of time backfilling information for them. That's why it's important for me to take my children to different places, poetry readings, whether we at a rally, different events, for them to see the world in a different way. I would say I have had various opportunities to do that, being an educator in Newark. I mean, first of all, in a classroom as a teacher, trying to just manage those young people in the classroom and the things that you have to do is a very daunting task in and of itself, to be able to do that and be able to impart information on kids that sometimes are not interested or don't want to know what you're giving them. So it's important to be able to manage that in a way. And so they even call it classroom management, right? To be able to manage daily procedures and the people and their parents. But when I became a vice principal and a principal, then I really began to understand what management was really about, because not only do you have to manage the children and their parents, you have to manage dozens of teachers, hundreds of teachers, if you will, aides, guidance counselors, cafeteria workers, security guards, the custodial staff. And so the principal, to me, is probably like one of the most difficult jobs to have in America. And I think an urban principal is probably up there with the top 5 difficult things to do, difficult professions, because you're responsible for everything. I mean, in the school, so when the state says we have to cut the budget, and people don't understand really what that means. So if they tell you have to cut $5 million, you can't just cut paper and supplies, because that's not going to get you the money you need. So we arguing even in the municipal election about the kind of fiscal crisis the city is in. And so if you have a $40, $50 million gap, you can't just focus on small things. That means bodies, it means people. So in schools, it might mean a science teacher, it might mean a librarian, it might mean a guidance counselor. It might mean the basketball coach, right? So these are things that you have to make decisions about. In a municipal government, it might mean code enforcement, it might mean police officers, it might mean sanitation workers, which in fact the previous mayor had to make those decisions. So I didn't vote to cut the police officers, the 170, but I understand why that decision was on the table. The MUA, the privatization of selling of the water versus 40%, 30% tax increases versus laying off 170 cops or 800 employees as a whole. It's centered around you have to balance the budget, and the numbers that you have to balance are huge numbers. And ultimately, you have to find ways to raise revenue for the city. I'm used to pressure, right? They say pressure busts pipes, right, or makes diamonds. So the reality is every single day growing up in the city, you feel some sort of pressure And as a principal of a school, the pressure is always there, especially in an urban district where people are counting on you to take care of their children, make their kids safe, or this whole issue around high stakes testing. And being able to meet those goals every year, to see and the kind of work that you do every single day to make sure that kids are succeeding, not just because you want them to succeed, but because all eyes are on you. If it doesn't work, and then people are talking about closing schools and renewing schools and all of these things, there's so much pressure to succeed, and I understand even how the kids feel, the kind of pressure that they have to pass these kinds of tests. So every day we feel that pressure. I walk the kids to the bus stop every day after school as a principal, because I know how difficult it is going up and down that street, and the pressure of us making sure that the environment is safe, that the kids are safe back and forth, coming to school and going home from school, that, and making sure we have a strong curriculum where kids are learning every day, even the most difficult to teach kids, because ultimately we have learned how to get a handle on kids that are easier to teach and begin to move them forward, but more difficult to teach kids, poses a different kind of a set of issues and problems. And so it creates the level of pressure to be able to educate those kids, right? You have kids we have autistic kids in the building, kids that are severely learning disabled, moderately learning disabled, with regular ed kids in the building. We have kids that are English language learners. We put them all in same or similar classes, infuse them together. So the kind of pressure to see that those things work, all of the things that you do every day to make sure that stuff comes out successful. So I think we've done a great job there, and I actually perform better under pressure, I believe. I think that I'm born for times to be able to solve the kind of problems that we have every day. I think Newark prepared me for that. Being an educator in this town for 22 years prepared me for that. Living in and growing up in a family like I have has prepared me for the kind of obstacles that's going to face me as the mayor of this city. I believe leadership is not based on ambition, right? So leaders are not built because they're ambitious. I think leaders are created based on necessity. The time creates leaders. The condition creates leaders. That leaders step up because the time says that they have to. And I think that that's what the time in Newark is demanding, that we have a particular kind of leadership, that we've had these kind of individual leaders based on their pedigree and all these other things, that we need a community leader now that's going to bring this neighborhood and community together. I think the lights are on, the people are filled in the auditorium, the curtains are drawn. I mean, Cory Booker has shined the light on the stage, and it's time for Newarkers to perform, right? And so we got to get the dance together, get it choreographed, get whatever we need to do, put everybody on stage and make it happen. I went to Newark Public Schools my entire life. My brothers and sisters used to march from 10th Street up to 16th Street to Madison Avenue School. No matter what the weather conditions were, we went to school in 2 feet of snow. I mean, there's a sprinkle of snow on the ground, they closing schools. But back then we went to school, to Madison Avenue School. I skipped kindergarten, so I went to the first grade, and so I've always been a grade ahead at Madison. I had wonderful teachers there, Miss Edmonds and Miss Branch, that I still remember. Mr. Dasher, my principal, Mr. Edelstein. I had a great experience at Madison Avenue School. When I was a kid, it was a community school. People cared about us. And, it was difficult growing up in Newark at the time. All my brothers and sisters, we had strange last names, people picked on us sometimes, and it caused us to get into little skirmishes. My older brother probably could tell you more about that than the rest of us. Then I went to Clinton Place Junior High School after that, which was around the corner from my home on Clinton Place off of Clinton Avenue. I went there for the 6th grade, and then I took a test to go to University High School. And when I went to University High School, we were on James Street. We used to have holes in the wall. You could reach your hand through the wall and say what's up to the other person over there. That's how big the holes were. And we learned, it was a very small school at that time. Before that, it was a school within a school. and they had just moved to, I believe, from out of Shabazz to James Street where I was, and I went to school there, caught 2 buses in the 7th grade to get there. And then they moved the school from James Street to the old Clinton Place where I went, and there was a big community to do about moving the school from James Street to Clinton Place, right? And it happened. And you know, I stayed at university from the 7th grade to the 12th grade. I wanted to leave there. I wanted to go to Malcolm X Shabazz High School. My brother, he was a baseball, basketball, football star. You know, I wanted to go down there with my friends, but, you know, I think my parents made the best decision and kept me at University High School. I met wonderful people there. My guidance counselor, Miss Holliday, I think is responsible, besides my dad, for me going to Howard University. She took me on a trip, historical black colleges and universities. When I stepped foot on Howard's campus, I knew this is the school I wanted to go to right away. And I wasn't even supposed to go on the trip. I was trying to avoid going on the trip, actually. I walked past her, went in the building. She grabbed me and said, you need to get your permission slip signed. I was a smart kid, so I said, I don't have a permission slip, so I can't go. So she called my parents on the phone and made sure I got permission, and I got on the bus, and I went down there on the trip, and I think that thing had actually changed the trajectory of my life, being able to go to Howard University and experience that. I had 2 sets of friends in high school because I went to university. I had friends that went to school with me at university, and the conversations were different. The conversations were about school, were about college, were about passing tests, but it also was about other things kids talked about. Then I hung out on Avon and 11th Street and Avon and 14th Street, the pool hall in front of Yusef's, mostly about what was going on in the neighborhood and, the difficult things that people were having and times that were having parties and all these kinds of things. And it was just 2 different kind of lifestyles and that kind of dichotomous relationship. When I started going to college, my best friend was catching a bus to 13 to turn himself in and go to Annandale, which is a youth correctional facility. And I had everything I owned going on to the train station to go to Howard University. And I think that's what inspired me really to come back to Newark and make sure that, more people were able to catch the bus to school and not jail. And, I don't think God sent me back to Newark to just hang with everybody that had it made, but to be able to do something about people's lives that didn't have the same opportunities that I had, didn't have the same choices that I have, and didn't make the right decisions, that maybe they needed somebody else in their life to help them make a decision that they couldn't make or they didn't make when they were my age. And I know that because I've seen it firsthand. People always say that the mayor is not in charge of the schools, but the mayor is in charge of the city. So I think the mayor is the CEO of everything that happens in this town. So schools are a part of a larger system. I think part of the problem is people treat schools as a separate system than Newark. And so Newark, the public school system is encompassed inside of a larger city, and all of the things that happen in the city affect the educational process. The institutions, the universities that are here, the philanthropic organizations that are here, the private sector, the social organizations, the nonprofit, all of these affect the trajectory of these young people, the success of these schools, even the police department, how the police are deployed before and after school affects kids' safety going to and from school. So the mayor has a very intricate part in the development of children's lives in this city. Right, so all of the institutions in this city, whether it's NJ PAC or Newark Symphony Hall or the library or the museum, all these institutions should have direct contact with our children with curriculum development, through after-school programming, enrichment programming. All of these things can be affected by the mayor. All of the universities that are in our city have to have a direct responsibility for the young people in the town. So we have to encourage the universities to expand, but to expand with the children that already are in our city, right? And that's important for them to be able to develop STEAM and STEM programming from elementary school all the way up to even helping us create programming in the school that will help children or young people who don't decide to go to college for workforce development. And so those things are important, and the universities can play a very important part in that, not just student development, but also staff and teacher development. So we have all of these brilliant people at these universities should be helping us kind of figure out how to improve schools in an environment like this and be a part of the whole urban reform discussion. I think it's silly for us to have a discussion and not include the universities in that discussion. And the mayor has the ability to make those things happen, just like the mayor has the ability to help expand the Jewish Renaissance healthcare centers in all of the high schools, or get them put in elementary schools to make sure that we expand that or have some money or some funding so kids are able to not miss school and get checkups in school and be able to expand the time so it doesn't end at 4 or 5, but in maybe at 7 or 8 o'clock, so parents can also be involved in that. I think the mayor has a very, very important role in the success of schools and the success of communities, period. We start before May 15th, right? So May 15th, we just hit the ground running. So we've already began to establish relationships with people and organizations to begin to let them understand that we have to develop a plan and a strategy that the community embraces, right? And it doesn't have to be one that everybody agrees with, every tenant on it, but it has to be one that we have a consensus around, that we're going to move forward on, that we're able to bring people in the room who are not necessarily brought into the room together, that we're creating platforms for parents, for the university community, like I said, for educators, for teachers, for parents to be at the table and come up with a strategy that I think that should be led by educators. It should be led by educators, university educators, in the secondary schools. And I think it should be led by them because they know best. They know best practices, and begin to organize a strategy of how to move Newark Public Schools forward, and not just in an academic sense, but in a fiscally responsible way, in a way where we don't have to close 20, 30 schools, where we don't have to disrupt neighborhood schools, in a way that affects what kids are learning in classrooms, because I think school reform really should be centered around what happens in a classroom and not just around where kids go to school at. So the building itself is not what's educating the kids. What's happening in the classroom is more important than any of that. And I think that our discussion should be centered around what happens every day in children's classrooms and the cognitive demand. What are we asking kids to do and perform every single day that they show up in school, and how do we actually get them to school? And we have enough people in the city that are interested in that and will give up their fighting and put their weapons down and put their shields away and come to the table and say, listen, let's make this happen. And I think the mayor has a responsibility and an obligation to get that done.